All right, team, so we've talked about the basic components of organic molecules and their functional groups. Let's dive in and talk a little bit more about the general characteristics of the biological macromolecules and how we build those macromolecules and we break them down. So most biological macromolecules, macro just means big, right? So macromolecule is a big molecule. Most of those macromolecules are built by connecting monomers together to create polymers, okay? So a monomer is a single molecule. It's kind of like a single unit, like one Lego, right? And we can connect many of these monomers together. Each monomer might have a slight different shape. They might have a slightly different functional groups to them, but they're all of the same class usually. That we connect many of these monomers together to create longer chains. So multiple smaller monomers to connect together is what we call a polymer. So for example, in carbohydrates, a very common monomer is glucose, a single sugar. And then we can connect together many of those single sugars together to create a polymer, complex carbohydrate, right? So simple sugar to complex sugar. And each group of macromolecules, each kind of class of macromolecules, has its own type of monomer that it can use to build larger molecules. And we'll cover some of those this week in the rest of the macromolecule classes later in our class. But regardless of what class of macromolecule we're dealing with, they all kind of follow the same pattern of connecting together monomers to create a polymer. And so just like we can build molecules by connecting atoms together, by bonding atoms together, we can connect smaller molecules by bonding them together to create larger molecules. So here we are building a polysaccharide, a multi-sugar, a large molecule, a complex macromolecule from the monomers of single sugars. So we can connect together through covalent bonds parts of these monomers together. We bond them together to make larger molecules. So just like we connect atoms together through bonds, we can connect molecules together through bonds. And all of the large macromolecules in living organisms are formed through what we call dehydration synthesis. So that's the process that connects together these monomers, that bonds these monomers together, that builds that chemical bond between these monomers. So in this process of building this bond between monomers, water is created. So we're kind of removing a water molecule in a way. We're building a water molecule as a result of this synthesis. So synthesis just means to build. And dehydration means removing water, right? So what's going to happen is we take the hydroxyl group of one molecule and the hydroxyl group of another molecule. And now this oxygen right here, instead of being bonded to hydrogen, it will bond to the carbon in this molecule right here. So each of these points represents a carbon atom. Okay, so it's not written out, but in organic molecules, there's going to be lots of carbon. And basically, where two lines intersect, that represents there's a carbon atom there. And so what's going to happen is that this oxygen is going to bind with this carbon here instead of this hydrogen. This hydroxyl group right here, instead of bonding with this carbon, it's going to grab onto this hydrogen to form water, right? So we connect together these two monomers through this oxygen atom right here, and we basically remove a hydroxyl group and a hydrogen, which gives us a water molecule, H2O. So we build macromolecules, we build polymers, we connect together monomers to make polymers through the process of dehydration synthesis. Sometimes we need to break down those macromolecules into their monomers though, right? So we can reverse this process. We can take the polymers and we can break them down into the monomers through the opposite process called hydrolysis. So lys means to break and hydro means water. So we basically do the opposite. We take that oxygen that was connecting those two monomers together, we put some water back into it, we put an OH group, a hydroxyl group back onto one side, and then we reconnect this oxygen back with the hydrogen to produce those hydroxyl groups again. So water is used up in this process of hydrolysis. So dehydration synthesis builds up, hydrolysis breaks down polymers into their monomers. So each group, each class of biological macromolecule has its own set of monomers. So for example, amino acids bond together to form proteins. So amino acids are the monomers of proteins. For carbohydrates, the monomers are simple sugars. So we take many simple sugars and we bond them together to create complex carbohydrates. For fats and lipids, we take fatty acids and we bond them together to create fats and lipids. So the monomers would be fatty acids. We bond them together to create fats, waxes, lipids, oils, things like that. For DNA and RNA, nucleic acids, the monomer, the building blocks of DNA and RNA are what we call nucleotides. And we take these nucleotides and we bond them together to get DNA and RNA. So these are all the monomers, the different structures of the building blocks that we connect together to make each of the 4 classes of biological macromolecules. So proteins, carbohydrates, fats and lipids, and nucleic acids each have their own unique monomer. And each monomer, there can be many different types of the monomer. So for example, there are like 21 different types of amino acids, kind of like letters in an alphabet, right? We have 26 letters in our alphabet that we can combine in different combinations to make words and different words together to make sentences. There are 21 different amino acids that we can connect together to make proteins. And sometimes we can take those proteins and connect them together, right? There's many different types of simple sugars that we can connect together to make complex carbohydrates. Okay, so there are multiple monomers, which gives us a wide variety of the types of macromolecules that we can build.